I think this is part of the invitation and the way of the mystic to return to the earth. Like we've been open, we have the expansion and contraction as we have those earlier stages of awakening. And then we're hurtled deeper through the space that's created to see, and the lights go out and we're in the dark nights of the soul. And we have no choice but to see the sacred that's already here in the plants, the trees, the flowers, in the flesh, below us, around us, and within us. And I think this is a big shift that is happening now, where we have like identified as these things, and it's been like, I am that, which is true, but we are all that we have it within us.
Rebecca Campbell, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now in your life?
My mum and dad are here visiting, and it's so lovely. I grew up in Australia, and I live in Glastonbury, which I love, but I've got two young kids, and just seeing and hearing them giggling with their grandparents is just so fulfilling. I don't get that very often, so that's lighting me up so much.
And family are our biggest spiritual teachers, so I can imagine that
that's true.
Being around your parents now is bringing up a lot. As am I. I'm in Colombia right now, living with my parents here for a while, and it's definitely a challenge, but definitely beautiful on the other side.
It's so true. Wait, wasn't it Ram Dass who said, if you think you're spiritual, go and spend your holidays with your family? It's so true.
That's the best spiritual retreat.
I love it.
And Rebecca, on this show, we like to dive straight into the deep end from the get-go. And I want to take you back to 2017 when you had a very spontaneous mystical awakening during your Bhakti teacher training. And you said that there was like a call of the Great Mother that is opening the hearts of so many right now. I'm interested to know and very curious of where is that Great Mother arising from? And in our hearts, what is this cellular change that is going on in the world right now that happened to you in 2017?
Thank you. So the Great Mother is within all of us. I see her as the feminine principle on the earth and calling us deeper into the earth. Conceptually, I see the Great Mother as almost like being the original mother of us all. And when I see the Great Mother, and in this mystical experience I was in the arms of the Great Mother, and I saw the souls entering and leaving through the gates of life with the breath, and then surrounded by a group of guides I now refer to as the ancient grandmothers of the earth. And I saw them as like many, 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 and they're of all of us, not just my ancestral grandmothers, but all of our grandmothers who, if you track back through them, lead us to the origin, to the original mother. And so the Great Mother is really the unifier of us all. And I feel like, so many of us, it's not about masculine versus feminine. And for us to come back into that place of union of like his story versus her story and, all of that, we need to come and recreate our story. And it, for a long time, we've been looking towards, or we've been taught to look towards a male in the sky. And I think that the Great Mother is to look at the feminine in the earth, but it's not one or the other, it's the two together. And to see earth as not separate from cosmos, to see ourselves as not separate from star. And so it's not one is better or worse. It's just, for me, the experience of Great Mother Awakening is hurtling the soul deeper than before into matter, into the physical, into the earth, into the soil. And from my personal experience and witnessing others as well, we tend to begin our awakening journey with like an ascent, like an upward awakening, where there's awakening of the mind, awakening of the heart, awakening of the body. And then we're hurdled, some of us, into what I call the dark nights of the soul, or the descent. And mystics of old have spoken about this period. There's this ancient text that is, no one knows who wrote it. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. And it was the inspiration, St. John of the Cross, who is very well known and connected to Dark Night of the Soul. That's a text that I know he is connected to. And in it, they talk about this cloud of unknowing, of this, the intimacy that we once felt with our God, of like the big spiritual visions and the beloved, that, we were in the ecstasy and the bliss and all of that. And then all of a sudden we're hurtled deeper than before into the great mystery, into what I call the descent. And those spiritual tools that once served us so well in different stages of our awakening, all of a sudden no longer do. And in the descent and in the arms of the Great Mother, I think we find her there in the soil, in our bodies, as we're hurtled deeper into ancestral stuff, intergenerational stuff, childhood stuff, human stuff. And I think that many of us collectively are going through that right now.
You mentioned the spiritual tools of ancient cultures, and any culture or ancient civilization that we look into, they would have the oracle figure in their culture. And we heard about ancient Greece, that they had the Oracle of Delphi, where people would travel from far to go see this oracle, that she would give prophecies or insights about what's to come for humanity. And anyone that knows anything about oracle decks has probably heard your name. And I have a few of them over here with me in Spanish. But I wanted to ask you what you feel is the transformation of the oracle figure in today's modern culture, because we've heard about it in ancient lost cultures, but now it feels like it's almost re-emerging, and more people are beginning to work with their own oracular tools and their own oracular vision. So I'm really curious to hear about what you think is the new iteration of the oracle.
Well, I think that we are waking up to the fact that we are all oracles, or have the capacity to be oracles. I feel that so many of us have been taught to look outside of ourselves rather than within. And that's why in my first oracle deck, as you open the box, it says, "You are the oracle." The temple is within. It's always been within. And, I think that many of us, particularly around like our generations who have been on a spiritual journey and maybe have awoken and have like felt the call, oh my gosh, I'm a healer, I'm a light worker, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a mystic even. And then the deeper we go into our spiritual journey, the more we're like, okay, I used to identify with those titles. And in a way, it was like, there's a little bit of ego there, like I'm special. But then we realize, no, we all are. And I think this is the kind of like traction that we're in right now. Because I was mentoring an amazing woman called Annabelle Sharman. She wrote an amazing book called Future Ancestor. She's an Aboriginal woman from Australia. And my publisher, of which we both share, said to her, gave her this feedback, which was, be as mystical as you like. And she came to me and was like, what does that mean? Like, what do they mean mystical? And I'm like, well, because I had said, like, she's a channel. She writes like I do. Like the way I write books is different to the way other people do. And there's a lot of people who write like me as well. It has like, there's things being woven and I am in awe of how it all comes together, but it's not a linear process. It's like braiding something thread by thread by thread. And I knew she was that type of creative as well. And so they said, be as mystical as you want. And I'm like, well, I think it's just trust as it comes, be poetic, don't feel like you have to do things a certain way. She went and also spoke to her elder, and they said, oh, mystical is a word that white people use to describe the most normal thing in the world. It's yuma, which is oneness. Now, I think that's true. It's absolutely true. And we need these words, these kind of labels, in order to reclaim what is the most normal, natural thing in the world. And I think this is like to the point of the Great Mother Awakening and Dark Nights of the Soul and all of that. I think this is part of the invitation and the way of the mystic to return to the earth. Like we've been open, we have the expansion and contraction as we have those earlier stages of awakening. And then we're hurtled deeper through the space that's created, potentially, to see when the lights go out and we're in the dark nights of the soul, and we have no choice but to see the sacred that's already here in the plants, the trees, the flowers, in the flesh, below us, around us, and within us. And I think this is a big shift that is happening now, where we have like identified as these things, and it's been like, I am that, which is true, but we are all that. It's like the concept of healing, right? It's a return to wholeness. But even still, in the wellness kind of circles, and I know from my journey as well, I've always tried to be like, if we look at use the rose as a metaphor, I'm healing myself. I want to be in the full bloom state, in the full rose, gorgeous, fragrant, look how wonderful I am state. But if we remember that we are nature, we are just like the rose, and we don't look at the rose when it's in the bud or when it's released the very thing that captivated everyone to it, release the petals to the soil and is just bare, but is trusting that if it does release those petals, it will nourish what is to come, and the fruit will follow, and then the new buds will follow. And so this concept of healing is always happening, change is always happening, is linked as well to this fact that like we're all healers, because a flower is a healer, really, because it knows that it's forever whole. And it's this relationship, I think, to change that, it is like nature is the greatest mystery school there is. The best book you'll ever read. I shouldn't say this as a writer who has a new book coming out, but nature, the best book.
Go read Nature.
Read a flower.
It's so funny that you spoke into the rose, because this is a question I often ask most of my close friends when they come back from a trip or something life-changing that they went through. I always ask them this question. And I know for you, the month of July particularly was special. As you said, you called it The Mystic is Out of the Cave. If July had an album, it would be called The Mystic is Out of the Cave. So I'm curious to know, in the last few months, this question that I always ask my friends is, what was the thorn, the bud, and the rose of the last few months of your life?
Okay, the bud. The bud would be, the bud's like my body, actually, because I feel like I've been getting back into more somatic practices like dance, intuitive dance in particular. Every Monday I meet with a group of girlfriends and we just move however we want to. And there's always periods of my life where I forget to dance, and then I remember. I'm like, what was I doing? And so the bud is that, really deepening my practice with my body is, that feels really, really like a bud. The bloom feels like, I've got this, my book, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It. It's not out until, it's out in October. It's available for pre-order now. but like the book was originally meant to come out in 2021. If you go onto Amazon, like people were pre-ordering it and they were meant to get it in 2021. But it was the book, the title of the book changed. So it is a book about change. So there's that. But it's been like, I've written it through this period of change within myself. Also, I was pregnant twice or 3 times. I lost a baby as well. But I was writing it through birth and death, through like the COVID pandemic, through so much change. And it's felt like I've been kind of stabilizing all this transformation that I've been going through within my energetic body. And this whole like mystic out of the cave, which is the bloom. The bloom is like, woohoo, it's here. Let's share. I feel like finally I have the energy and the like the internal call to go out and be an extrovert and communicate what I've been processing all this time. Like it's literally been since that the book begins with the mystical experience I had that you opened with, which if anyone's watching this rather than listening, I've got a picture of, I'm pointing up at this card that's in my Starseed Oracle called Fall Into My Arms. And that deck I worked with Danielle Noel, but I drew this out. This is literally the depiction of the mystical experience that happened spontaneously, immediately. I went into trance. I started singing in these ancient languages that I had never heard before, and received such deep healing right down into my cells. And it completely changed me in an instant. And yet, I always say, with awakening experiences and particularly consciousness shifting mystical experiences, even if they're spontaneous, and sometimes especially when they are, like the integration, it might happen immediately. You might be completely different, but the integration takes such a long time. And mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, I'm completely changed by that moment. But it's taken 7 or so years for that to happen. And so that's the bloom that I feel. I'm like, I feel so relieved. I feel like all parts of me have come back together now. And I think with the world of social media, I mean, podcasts like this, we can have deeper conversations and talk about how we're changing in real time. But particularly when we have, you must experience it too, this like presence in the world, or this image that we're projecting out into the world, and we're changing, and we're always changing, right? It can sometimes feel like there is this like edge to it where it's like, like how do I bring it all the way up to speed with where I am right now without having to like process in real time, you know? I find that really challenging. I identify as a 4 on the Enneagram, and so authenticity is really important. And my call is definitely not to process out loud. You know, I like processing and write. I'm receiving and channeling writing as I'm going through something. And so yeah, it feels like, oh my God, such a relief to have that integration clicked into place, because I think when we go through big periods like this, and we all do, like I've just been through big portals of midlife, although I don't really think it's midlife now with increased life expectancy, but they call it the midlife transits. And I'm just not the same person, but I feel really excited because I feel like in some ways it's like there's this proper rebirth that's happened, and like, whoa, I get to like create my life now. It's like a whole nother life, the life I really want to live, versus, you know, we come in as souls with so much ancestrally, physically, societally. So yeah, that's a long answer for the bloom.
Beautiful. I love it. And, you know, my mother had a particular experience like you did. She lost a baby in birth. It wasn't very developed. It was around the 4th or 5th or 6th week. before she got then pregnant with me. But for someone that has such a spiritual perspective and is connected with the spirit guides, how do you view a miscarriage spiritually and having, a soul essentially on the other side supporting you?
Well, first of all, I'd say I think every birth is different and every pregnancy is different, and so I just want to say that. I'll talk to my experience and just generally what I've witnessed. So I've had 2 miscarriages myself. And the second one, I believe, was my daughter, who I ended up getting pregnant with soon after. Again, it's like about 3 or so months after. When I got pregnant with her, I felt her. When I was pregnant with all of my babies, people would say to me, because my thing is the soul, and they'd be like, "Oh, are you communing with the soul?" And da 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 da. And for each of my pregnancies, I did connect with the soul before I conceived them. It was quite subtle, clear, but subtle. But actually, for all of them except for the second miscarriage that I had, I didn't really connect in with the soul till around 6 months. Like there were a couple of moments, but not deeply, like the way that you would expect. You read these books, but that was just the way it was for me. And I remember saying to a therapist I was working with at the time, because of my line of work, I was really like, why am I not connecting in this way? And she was like, "But why would you pry open a bud before it's ready to bloom? Like it's happening on the physical." And I was like, "Oh God, yes, what a great lesson for me." Then once it was knitted into form, boom, I really felt the soul come in. But with my daughter, what I experienced was I felt her. Well, the miscarriage before my daughter, I felt the presence of that baby, and I felt it was a girl as well. And I knew when I was losing it that it was gone. But as soon as I lost it, and there was physical grief. It's very physical what happens hormonally. It's very complicated. But there was this part of me that knew she was coming back. And and so I have seen increasingly so a lot of souls that are wanting to come in, and it's complicated for them to come in. And so I do think there was some kind of preparation that needed to happen for my daughter to come in. And I do also think that so there's some souls that attempt to come in and then they come in the second time fully or the third time or whatever. But I do think that there are also souls who part of their contract is to be in form for some amount of time, and I remember one woman who had lost a baby. She was really in grief, and a teacher said this, and she said that what an amazing gift that you gave that soul to say yes to it being here, knowing that it wouldn't come all the way in. So I think it's really interesting, and I do think every circumstance is different. But I had this amazing, so I've got a podcast called Returning, and my friend Danette May, I interviewed on it, and she lost a baby. She had a stillbirth. And we discovered when we were talking this synchronicity that we'd both experienced, where both of us had lost our babies and had the due date. So for me, my due date was Christmas Day. No, sorry. I lost my baby on Christmas Day, and she lost her baby on a certain date. Let's say it's 3rd of May. I don't know what the date was. Both of us then got pregnant again, and the due date was the same day that we lost our babies.
Wow.
And so we discovered that live, talking on this podcast. And for me, what that what that meant was it was a sign that they were coming back. They were returning. It was the same soul. Yeah.
Wow,
I just
that
couldn't
gave me
believe that.
chills.
Isn't it amazing?
Wow.
What do
And
you
Rebecca, you
feel
had
like
a
with your mom and like, do you think it was you trying to come in or another soul?
so I had a connection with a friend who's a medium. Her name is Lisa Williams, and we were recording a show on psychic abilities. And after recording, we had dinners together, and I asked her like, "Hey, like I never really asked these things for myself, but I just wanted to share this experience that my mom had before I was born." And she's like, "Let me tune into it." She's like, "Are you ready to know everything?" And I'm like, "For sure." Because she always asks, like, "Do you want to know everything?" And I was like, "Hit me with it, whatever it is." And she's like, "I'm receiving that, first of all, you have to get your mom to understand that it wasn't her fault. And this was a contract that you and this other soul had, because you two have been sort of like twin souls, twin flame relationship that you guys have been working many lifetimes together. But essentially, you knew that at this time of awakening for humanity, only one of you was going to come and the other was going to stay on the other side to support from the spirit world. And initially, she had decided to step in first, but then something happened with the contract where she decided to step out. I came in physically to incarnate, and then having that connection from the spirit world with her. So for me, it was like wild. I know it wasn't the same soul. I know I've been connecting with this soul more and more as I became aware of this situation. And it's just been beautiful to witness the unfolding of knowing that I have that support on the other side, which is probably the same for a lot of people that have lost loved ones, parents, grandparents, that are still supporting after life.
Wow. That's so interesting. I think also it's like, as a mom, I look to my kids and I'm like, oh my gosh, you two have completely different mothers, just because the mother is so different. And so your mom having experienced that as well, like, changes who she is and who she could show up as to you as well. I think it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. You had a regression once, and you were taken to the moment before birth, and essentially you saw the moment where you chose your family of origin, and then you were taken to the Council of Light. And you said that in this meeting, or when you were presented in front of this council, you were shared or received this collective mission that a lot of people on the planet right now are sharing. If you were to speak words into what that mission is, to give, clarity for some that, I know when I was beginning to get into these topics and awakening, essentially, I knew I was here for something greater, but I didn't exactly know how to put it into words. Since then, have you been able to understand what that collective mission is for a lot of the souls that are incarnating on the planet?
I am still receiving so much from that experience. And I think our mystical experiences are like books in themselves. Like, we can continue to, it's like they exist energetically, and we can continue to receive. The way I talk about it now is that experience, it was like I saw us coming in with personal soul mission being like, you might call it karma, or, what you came here to do individually, which works ancestrally, etc. And then there's this thing which I call a double mission, which is a bigger collective mission, which doesn't mean it's better or worse or whatever, but it's something that's joint. And I saw us all as souls coming in waves, like we're like surfing these waves of consciousness, and that we chose to be here at this time. The guides that I connected with in the mystical experience in 2017, ancient grandmothers call it the quickening, where it's like we are here to be part of the rebirth of humanity. It's not the rebirth of the earth. The earth doesn't need us to survive. It's humanity. It's humanity. And we, as each of us awaken to that collective mission, as we remember the seed that we came in to share, something sparks in another. And so it is this thing of I do keep seeing these waves that we come in on and with, and media being a big part of it. Like what you're creating with this podcast is a big part of it. And there'll be, I'm sure that you've noticed it, where you see people where you're like, oh, you're one of me too. You came in with a similar seed to me. You know, it's a similar note. And as we each share this note, this sound, this vibration, then something is sparked in another. And so the other thing that the ancient grandmothers keep saying to me is, we each hold a thread for the healing of humanity. Don't underestimate the one that you are holding. And so it is like this braid or tapestry that we're each doing. And, you know, as you share your voice, as I share my voices, millions of others share their voice. It's like this ricochet that's happening. Yeah.
A friend of mine, Garen Jones, he has a saying that says, those who know who knows. And it's exactly what you were saying into.
Say that again. I love it.
Those who know who knows. So it's like those who remember their soul essence are able to recognize that in another. That's the way I perceive that saying. And it's like knowing that, you know, there was a soul plan, there was a soul mission. And right now we're like nodes connecting with each other, especially through media. Like you're on the other side of the world right now, and whoever's listening might be on another continent, and we're all, you know, collectively creating this thread. But apart from media, do you have any other insights as to what structures will be shifting as these waves of consciousness begin to creep in more and more into the planet?
What do you mean by structures?
Like speaking into maybe like media is like the institution of media, or the institution of education, politics, economics. Like we've heard a lot of teachers talk about how those structures need to fall in a way to be able to create the new. So if media is a big part of it, is there anything else that you think will be like a big pillar in that shift? Yeah,
I think pretty much every single system is going to be transformed, like every single system. And I think the thing, the watch out for us with this, because it's so easy to be like, that's wrong, that's, you know, anti, right? But it's like, what do we, you can create or destruct, right? So yes, tear down, we need to tear down, but what are we birthing? You know, because I think where we are on the planet right now, particularly with the world of media, which is amazing, but also, is this division and polarity of like wrong, right, bad, good, you know? And so it's just like that system is all messed up, so we should go with that. Like the answer is not the system. And I think that if you imagine like, you know, the metaphor of the butterfly with the chrysalis, where it's like in the transformation, like, and we are in the transformation, like we are we are in the chrysalis right now. We are the imaginal cells that exist within the chrysalis. But if you are to slice not that you'd want to do this, but the butterfly forming open.
Don't try this at home.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Let the butterfly be. Let it become. But if you would do it, it would just be messy organs and gunk. Like, and I think that's what we're in right now. And so I think that the invitation, and this is why the mystics, the artists, the poets, the inventors, all of us, like we're neat. And it's not just those who, when I say the mystics, the artists, it's not just the ones who are like, I'm a healer, oracle artist or whatever. I mean, activating those parts of us within ourselves, within all of the systems. Like we're all needed to do that. It's not like, oh, I'm going to come up with this idea to create this new system. No, like we are the system. Like it's like like one by one, one by one, one by one, one by one. We are the many. And I think this is why, like, we're living in this time, which actually breaks my heart, how it's like all of the temples and gurus and whatever, these people or systems or whatever that we've put up on these pedestals, do they all need to fall for us to realize that we have it within us? And I feel this grief within me because there's so much tearing down happening, and it's all within us as well, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's such a complicated time to be part of this rebirthing of humanity. What do you feel?
I love that I feel exactly the same. I feel like, you know, instead of saying like we need to collapse these structures, it's like seeing what has worked and what no longer works. And, you know, you had a feminine practice that you share, which is allowing things to properly end and leaving space without filling it in. So I feel like that's a beautiful way to, you know, picture even on a macro scale, the structures of the world. And, you know, some of these things are going to end on their own. Like we're seeing in real time the collapse of a lot of like democratic systems, especially in the US. Like we're just seeing how if we let it play out, and also learning to be in tune with the truth of what wants to be created through us, because you also mentioned that, you know, instead of calling it like God or the creator or Jesus Christ, you're calling it the intelligent pulse of life. And if the earth also has its own consciousness, it's going to want also its own desires and will to influence the species that are living on that planet. So I think it's really just about like realignment and allowing it to properly end as well.
Which is not an easy thing to do, but it's the most natural thing in the world to do.
And that's why exactly I wanted to speak to you about grief, because, you know, seeing something fall in front of your eyes, you know, our ego doesn't want things to change normally. And I know your recent book was a lot about grief and allowing things to end and change. So how do you deal with loss, with grief, especially in these moments where it's happening all around us?
Well, first of all, grief is evidence of how much we love or loved something, someone. So I think that's really important to remember when we're going through it. And I wonder if anyone else can relate to this. I know for me, when I've experienced deep grief, particularly like in the loss of a loved one, where there's this like feeling of like the opposites of grief in a way, where it's like it's agonizing, like aching of the heart, physical ripping open of the heart, chest region. It's physical. That's how intense it is. But then also there's this part of it that feels so good too. And it's because it's our connection to our love. And so as human beings, if we don't experience grief at some point, it's like our heart's probably closed off. And I think that with so many of the things that are happening to humanity right now, it's a normal reaction for us to feel grief collectively. I feel as well with grief. I watched something recently. I can't remember who was saying it, but they were describing the difference of grief and depression. And they were saying grief is alive. It's like feelings in motion. It's life in motion. Versus depression is pushing something down, cutting it off, closing off the heart. And for me, that description of depression versus grief was like, that is the difference, you know? The thing with grief is that it is like the ocean. And, you know, they say, you know, it's like this too shall pass. I think, was that Maya Angelou who said that? And it's true. And when you're going through grief, you're like, when will this be over? But it seems to have this intelligence to it. And if we let it move through us, and obviously doing the things that will support us at the same time as well, whatever that is, whether that's like just finding ways to keep the heart open or giving yourself little windows to really let the tears flow or the rage out or whatever it is, going for walks in nature, whatever it is that we're being called to do to tend to ourselves, it will move through us. And through that movement, we will be transformed. We will be a completely different person than we were before it touched us, before it touched our heart. I don't believe that it's possible to go through this life with an open heart and not experience grief. And when we have gone through that portal, and you can feel who has gone through that portal because they can sit alongside you. They're not triggered by your grief because they have been through their own. Yeah. That's such a gift.
Yeah. And going on that notion of following and aligning again to the intelligent pulse of life, do you feel that there is also an intelligent pulse of the death process in itself?
Totally. Like death and birth are just like, they're so close together. Like, you know, when I had my son, I gave birth to him at home in the water. He was born actually in his little sack, so my water didn't break. It's like, they call it NCAL. It's like 1 in 80,000. It's like this. They used to take those babies away in ancient Egypt and other places to be the priests, away from the mums. I'm glad I don't
breathe
underwater. Yeah, literally, it was a water birth within a water birth. Yeah.
What?
But anyway, so the birth was so full on, but I would say it was a positive birth experience. But on day 3, what happens to a woman, if you don't know, your milk comes in, and I ended up getting blood poisoning through a thing called mastitis. I got taken to hospital. I almost died. I was very, very like near death, very, very not okay. And ended up coming back home, completely changed by the experience. I was telling my husband what to do with my son, thinking I wasn't going to make it through, like literally at the gates of life, thinking this was it for me. And I was talking to my mum because I basically needed to learn how to express my boobs so I could bottle feed. And my mum started teaching my husband how to bottle feed. I'm like, how do you know how to do this, Mum? And she was like, oh, and I had known this part of the story. 10 years before I was born, she was pregnant. She was a teenager and was sent away to have the baby. Some of her brothers and sisters didn't even know. And her job while she was pregnant was to feed the other babies, knowing that she wouldn't be able to do the same for her. Now, she ended up giving birth to her daughter, adopted out, didn't see her. So much grief there. I was the next baby who came, and I always felt afraid of birth, afraid of being a mother. I could feel how much grief was there. I didn't quite understand it. Anyway, cut to me having just had my son, just out of hospital, as my milk came in, and Mum then just said, out of nowhere, I drilled her on my birth because I believe that our birth can set up a blueprint for our life, which, you know, it's not to make it a positive or negative thing. I think our soul chooses a lot of this stuff. And then she was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. It's like, remember when I had you, There were so many babies in the hospital that I gave birth to you in the corridor. And then we were meant to have our own room, but we ended up sharing a room with that mother who had just lost her baby. And I was like, what? She'd never told me that. And she said, yeah, she had a stillbirth. And so as you were born, her baby died. And we were sharing the room, and you would cry and bring in her milk, and she would wail and wail and wail, knowing because, yeah. And so in these first 3 days of my life, it was like birth and death right there. And when my mum told me that, I just began to sob because I'd always felt that grief. That and every birthday, just this sorrow all through my spiritual journey. And this is what I mean about the soul choosing sometimes the conditions. Because if I look at my spiritual journey, and I wrote about this story in my book, Light is the New Black, and the book was dedicated to a woman called Angela Wood, who initiated my spiritual path. She lost her daughter at the tender age of 15, which was a similar age to I was when I read about her in a little magazine. It was a girls' magazine where you learn about boys and what's happening to your body and, celebs and stuff. And I remember reading about the story of her and her daughter that she had lost, and the mother's grief of losing a child. And it hitting me so hard. It was very out of the blue for me. Like, I didn't grow up in a spiritual family. I hadn't thought about spirits or medium or anything like that. But that night I could feel that presence and that grief and that connection. The next day I was at school, and I'm a teenager, and I showed my friend Jenny this article and pointed at the woman, Angela, the mother, and said, it's so weird. I just can't stop crying. I feel like I have to find her. And I just feel like I just want to hug her and make it better. And I don't know what it is. And Jenny's like, that's really weird. I'm like, I know it is. And then she looked up and she's like, that woman over there looks like her. And it was her. It was her. She was at my school. Like, wow. It's just school students and teachers there. She was talking to the senior students, and long story short, we ended up meeting, and her and I together, she took me to my first spiritual workshop, my first I Can Do It Hay House event, and she leant over and whispered in my ear and said, that'll be you up there one day. Wow. And I've had several women along my journey who had lost babies, who I had been connected to and channeled messages from their loved one past. Mediumship has not been a path that I've been called to walk with my creations, but it was instrumental in it. And so these gates of life and death, I think babies and people who are near the end of their death, I think we've got it all wrong. We should revere them, those who are so close to the gates of life. And this is, our society doesn't revere that. It doesn't revere birth. It doesn't revere death. And I think we've got it all wrong in that way. As a woman who has given birth, there are no words for it. And the mother is not supported. In many ancient cultures, the top level of meditation practice is breastfeeding. How you can connect to God is that. And that's why it's the mother is worshipped in that way, because she is at the highest connection. Yeah.
That is beautiful. Seeing it that way. Now this explains your Scorpio rising.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That explains it. That story explains it.
You got Scorpio in your chart? You must.
I have in Vedic, I have a Scorpio rising.
Do you?
But in Western, I'm a Sagittarius rising.
No.
but my son's in my 8th house. So yeah, pretty much a lot of Scorpio energy. And my mom's a double Scorpio.
Is she? Oh my goodness. My
double.
Venus is in Scorpio too.
And for everything that you've birthed into the world, your creations, you've said that there's always a guide or a collective of guides that you work with. So the first book was the Council of Light, and then it was the Magdalens. This recent birthing of the project and the book that you worked on, what was the guides and the collectives that were working with you on this particular book?
So it was the ancient grandmothers that I was mentioning before, and then I would say the Great Mother, and I think that is such a huge term for, like, it's such a simple term for such a huge energy, goddess, feminine, sacred feminine. But yeah, ancient grandmothers.
And what's the most beautiful thing that you've ever witnessed?
Oh, I would say my daughter being born. And this is not to say it wasn't beautiful. Like, my son entering was just as beautiful. The thing that was so beautiful about my daughter entering is my intention with that birth was for her and my nervous system to be regulated. And she came in, she was underwater for a couple of minutes because, they don't, like, they're in the water world of the womb. I slowly brought her up, and everyone in the room knew that that was my intention. Because when I'd had my son, because of the ancestral stuff and I guess just society as well, it was like one thing, then the other, then the other. Like the birth was really expansive and powerful. I really connected in with such a powerful ancestral force and the rage and the power of all women through all the ages. Like, it was incredible, activating. And as my son came up, I held him. It was, oh my God, that was like the most intense experience of my life for sure. But I had this part of me that was like, oh, I need to share him around. Oh, do you know that part of me? And I think that was because within my ancestral line, so many of the women had given up babies or been forced to. And so that was there when I had my son. And he has been such a purifier for me, such an activator for me. Like, so him entering the world helped me heal my nervous system. It brought up everything unlike it. And because of him, that moment with my daughter coming in, that was possible. And her coming up, and I saw her taking her first breath and looking into my eyes, didn't cry, literally did not cry. And yeah, everything just expanded. I had these two incredible women, and I wrote about them in my new book, Your Soul Had a Dream, Your Life Is It, who were my friend Binny Dansby, who she did the first water birth in America. She now lives here in Glastonbury. And she was there. And then there was another lady who was her really good friend. Binny's in her mid-80s, and Julia, who's a midwife, is in her 70s. And so these elders, oh my God, like, the sign of a healer and a midwife is the ability to hold space. And I think this is what has been taken from birth. Doctors coming in, not against doctors. Again, this is not about bringing down and just like destructing it all, but it's like they are delivering the baby. Do you know what I mean? They delivered the baby. Like, if the language, same thing with
they get the credit.
Exactly. But the same thing with the language that you were mentioning, the message from the medium to your mum of like, it's not your fault. That word miscarry, when it happened to me, I was like, it makes it sound like my body didn't do like I did something wrong, miscarry, like, yeah. Anyway, so I had these two incredible women there who could have been there like going, oh, let's measure you, let's do this, let's do that. No, they walked in the room. I didn't even look up at them, but I felt the energy in the room shift. It was dark and everything just went, the pain in my body went down by about 25% just with their presence. So yeah, incredible.
They knew how to hold the space.
They knew how to hold the space, and they did it with breath as well. Because this is the codes of life are in birth. Like the body knows how to do it. Nature knows how to do it. The safer the mother feels, the more she can open. All animals are like that too. Animals go into the darkness to give birth. They have to be safe and supported. Yeah. And I think, and this is I kind of have been struggling to describe what this book is about because it's the codes of life, like of rebirth. They're so simple, but so deep. It's hard to put into words, but it's like, it is all there. We've been taught to like overthink it or whatever, but it's like, these are the most natural things in the world and all the codes of life are encoded within it. How do we, and I think this is part of like the spiritual journey where it's like, at first we think there's this destination to get to. And then we have these experiences like you were asking so beautifully before, like what was the message from that mystical experience? And I'm like, oh, I'm still getting it now.
Yeah.
And so that's why the best book is the flower. The best book is the tree. The best book, Mystery School of Nature. Mm-hmm.
Go read Nature and pre-order Rebecca's book.
Exactly.
You know, I feel like the shift that we've been talking about with the collective consciousness, it is accelerating, especially because the souls that are coming in right now are being raised by already conscious parents. And for someone that, you know, has given birth twice and has, you know, very, very small little children that will end up to be the leaders of the future, what advice would you give to someone that is going to be raising families, children of the new earth?
Oh my God. Okay. So it's probably not what other people will say, but I'm going to say it. Well, I think the thing that a lot of people will resonate with, I think being a human is the hardest thing. It is not straightforward. Being a parent is so hard. Now, I knew it was going to be difficult. I resisted being a parent because I felt from such a young age, I felt the call of the mystic and like to put creations out into the world. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to be able to do that with a family, with, you know, dependence and all of that? So I'd resisted it and questioned it, to be honest. So I was ready for that. The thing and the sleepless nights and, you know, all of that, which are just, oh my God, they will test you so much. Maybe some people, I don't know. I don't know how anyone would find it easy. The thing I would say that I was not ready for is the reparenting of self. How the child can bring up the unhealed parts of you from when you were that age. Also, if you keep your heart open to them, it will rip you right open. It really will. Okay, so here's a perfect example. I'd been really into mother and child, Mother Mary, Great Mother, Goddess, all of that. So I thought I was like, yep, I've got the whole mother and child thing. No freaking idea. I remember my friend Binny saying in the early weeks of having my son, every time I entered the room, she would say, "Here comes the goddess." And I'd be like, yeah, don't feel like a goddess, whatever you're saying. But she kept on announcing it as soon as I walked in the room. And she kept on pointing towards my son saying, "See, look at him. You're the goddess." And I just thought she was saying like, "Oh, you're a goddess." It's not what she was saying. She was alerting me to how he was seeing me, looking at me. And he wasn't looking at me like I was a goddess. He was looking at me like I was the goddess, the creator. And it almost ripped me apart because I saw the amount of love that he came in with. And love brings up anything that's unlike it. And for me, what it alerted me to was this cellular memory of all the love that I came in with. And it made me question, like, is it even possible for one human to receive all that love? And we all came in like that, gallons of love. And then especially in our society where we don't come into village, we generally come into apartments and, you're living on the other side of the world. And it was heightened for me because soon after I had my son and I live on the other side of the planet from my family in Australia. I'm here in the UK. COVID happened, lockdown happened. So there was literally no one else. It was just me and my husband, like happened to so many people. And it was impossible for me to hold all of that love. And I remember looking at all these mother and child statues that I had all over my house. And there's the church just down the road. I would walk there. And the mother and child statue where Mary is basically holding Christ like that. And he's out with arms wide open, the baby.
Like the Lion King.
Like the Lion King, exactly. And I saw it in this whole different way. And I'm like, we all come in with gallons of love like that. And we can only receive however open our heart is. And so that blasting really brought up so much within me, and particularly around those younger years, because it's pre-verbal. So it doesn't quite make as my son gets older now, he's only 4 now. He's still not, totally logical, lots of tantrums. But I notice as he gets older and older, it brings up little things within me, within my husband, that were back there. And so that's the invitation. And I wish I knew more about that before I became a parent, because it just saves you from being like saying, what's wrong with me, to, wow, what great syllabus, or I'm really being activated here. I wonder what this is, particularly in those young years, because you might not have the memory for it. You might not have been told stories about it. And so parenting is, holy moly. I thought entrepreneurship was, they say it's the self-development course or whatever. Being a parent is the biggest spiritual practice I've ever done in my life.
And being with your family on holidays.
Oh yeah, that too. Oh yeah, then there's your family. Yeah, so basically just, move to an island on your own.
I know we started with the oracle, speaking about the role of the oracle, and really to begin tying a knot on this beautiful transmission, I wanted to ask you if you've ever used your oracle tools to receive information or prophecies for what's coming next for humanity in the coming years.
Yeah, I tend to do that through written word. But yeah, totally. I think that's really why I write, to make sense of it and to receive like word after word after word of like what we are becoming and where we are headed. And I feel like we're all needed here, but it's not in this way of like, it's in this way of like, we're special, but we're not special. It's like we're all just part of this thread that's being woven. And what I keep getting is so important is that we stop turning against each other and meet each other eye to eye rather than above or below. And I think particularly like in spiritual conscious circles as well, like we've seen it with the fall of the guru and, you know, all of that. Like, it's why for me, the way of the mystic resonates so much, because it's just like an invitation to see the sacred that's already here and always has been here. And yeah, to see ourselves as special, but not special as well. Like it's all, yeah, that's what I keep seeing. And even I just came back recently from teaching at the Omega Institute, and I really felt a shift. I hadn't done a retreat or a long group work session for about a year, and I really felt the shift in all of us, where there was one woman who stood up and said, this the exercise was like receiving a message from the Great Mother and what's my soul calling me to do. And she really was like struggling to express it, like as in like, who am I to do this and who am I to say this, which I think often comes up when we connect in with the soul. And what she expressed was something that every single woman in the room had received the exact same call. Now, their way of expressing that call would be completely different. But so many people in the room were there going, oh, who am I to this? Who am I to do this? Who am I to do this? Oh, that's just too huge. That's too huge. I can't do that alone. But then everyone looked eye to eye at each other and was like, me too, me too, me too. Everyone was hearing the call of the Great Mother to protect the children of the earth, to protect the earth, to come back to each other. There was not one person who had not heard that call. And I think what is happening and the invitation that's happening is for us to stop being in silo and feeling like, oh my gosh, this is my purpose, my call, and be like, no, I am just one of the imaginal threads for humanity, of the earth, extension of the earth, part of the cosmos. Even like when we're experiencing these astrological things, whether it's like a lunar eclipse or Mercury in retrograde or blah, blah, you know, whatever the latest one is, it's so easy to see it like this is happening to me, this thing. And yeah, it can feel spiky and difficult. But if we shift the perspective and be like, no, I am part of nature. Nature is part of the cosmos. I am part of the cosmos. I'm just changing with the cosmos. It's not this thing that's happening to me. So I think that is what's happening. And I think that's also the invitation to say yes to that and to let that happen. Now, there's nothing we need to do to let that happen, but the letting it happen, there's a doing in that too.
Rebecca, what does that call of the Great Mother look like in men?
What a beautiful question. I have two answers to that. The first one is, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. The second one is, revere the feminine. Revere the feminine in everything, including you, the earth, the children, the women, you know. Revering the feminine is the opposite of, you know, seeing women as crazy, seeing women as weak. It's the opposite of that. Yeah.
That is very powerful.
What a great question.
We end every show with a segment called the final trio, which are just little rapid fire questions we ask at the end. But where would you send people first to connect with you, your work, all the different offerings and beautiful work that you're putting out into the world? Where would you send them to connect with you?
Just head to my website, rebeccacampbell.me, or look me up on Amazon. I got books and oracles and all that.
Awesome. We'll include everything in the show notes. And for the final trio, the first two are personalized to the guest. And then the final one we ask at the end of every show. So the first one I had for you is, what is one thing that would light up the world the most right now?
I would say if everyone just took a moment to put your palms on the earth or hands on a tree, look at that book of nature, just for a moment every day, returning to that.
Beautiful. And what have flowers taught you about trusting the divine timing of life?
I would say that flowers don't open and close according to who's walking by. They just trust their timing and, bloom or bud or release their petals accordingly.
Interesting. And also I would add, some people can also act as activators for us to blossom in our life. Like, for example, me coming across your work and a lot of the work of the guests has activated me in ways that will allow then the intelligence of the flower within me to blossom even more. So thank you for that.
Yeah, bless you. Thank you. You too, to me. I really, really see you in your depth and sincerity and just the potency of what you offer here.
Thank you. I received that. And the final question we ask at the end, we call it the time capsule question, because it requires us to travel out a little bit out into the future, around 15 to 20 years down the line. I chose out those time frames because I believe that's going to be a time when the younger generations of today will be stepping into leadership positions around the world. And just like any great leader, they will need a great mentor, great guidance, great wisdom passed down to them. So you had the opportunity to have a time capsule that then you would leave behind for these leaders when it comes to time for them to truly blossom into their leadership. And you can include anything that you wanted inside of the time capsule. It could be a teaching, a book, something physical, something non-physical, a vibrational transmission, whatever it is. But knowing that when they open this time capsule, they will then be equipped with all the necessary tools, wisdom, and guidance that they would need to spearhead and pioneer the new earth that we are co-creating together. What would you include in the time capsule?
I would include sacred waters. And I live here in Glastonbury, so I would put in a bottle red and white spring water, but with a note that obviously it's the most precious diamond we have, the water, clean water, but also water carries memory. And so that you can reach back through the waters to the ancients to receive whatever it is that you need, wisdom-wise.
So interesting you said that.
Oh yeah,
because I have the one oracle I have here with me is the sacred waters.
Oh, amazing.
Las aguas sanadoras in Spanish. So that's interesting. You ended it with that. Rebecca, thank you so much for your infinite wisdom, presence, authenticity. I would love to continue weaving with you, and excited for your book to come out and read the entirety of it when it comes out. Thank you so much again, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah. Oh, that was lovely.